The night was heavy with tension, every shadow seeming to whisper secrets I didn't want to hear. I sat in the quiet of our penthouse, staring at the city lights that stretched endlessly below, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on me. Eli had left me alone for a moment, allowing me to process the chaos that had become my life in the past weeks. My mind kept drifting back to Darius, my son, who had somehow managed to spiral so completely out of control that even my wealth couldn't shield him from his own recklessness. I thought about the reckless choices he had made, the loans he had taken, and the businesses he had gambled on without any consideration for consequences. I recalled the designer bags, the trips to Europe, the nights spent in lavish restaurants, all funded by credit lines that were already maxed out, a lifestyle that Tasha enabled with reckless abandon. I felt both anger and sorrow at the thought of it, anger at their carelessness and sorrow at the inevitable collapse that was now looming over him. My heart ached as I imagined him pacing in desperation, realizing for the first time that money cannot erase mistakes, and that charm and entitlement cannot protect anyone from reality. Eli's presence beside me offered a steadying calm, a reminder that not everyone in my life had intentions tainted by greed or manipulation. He didn't need to speak. The gentle touch of his hand on mine conveyed more reassurance than words ever could. I wiped my face, trying to hold back tears, knowing that giving in to emotion wouldn't change the facts. Darius was in trouble, and his troubles were of his own making. The creditors he owed were not ordinary people. They were dangerous, individuals who understood no limits, who demanded repayment and threatened consequences for delays. My protective instincts flared at the thought of what might happen if he faced them alone. I wanted to call him, to beg him to stay safe, to promise that somehow we would pull him out, but I knew that wouldn't teach him the lesson he needed. I had spent years trying to be both a mother and a safety net, shielding him from failure, but Eli's voice had opened my eyes to a difficult truth. Sometimes love meant standing firm, even when it hurt. I remembered the messages Eli had shown me, each one dripping with manipulation, pleading, and a sense of entitlement that made my stomach churn. Darius had not reached out to apologize or explain his actions. He had only sought money, attempting to leverage my new life and marriage as a way to solve his self-inflicted problems. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly, willing myself to remain calm. The maternal instinct to rush to him was strong, almost unbearable, but I reminded myself that if I intervened now, I would only perpetuate his recklessness. I needed to trust the process, trust the plan Eli had laid out with Mark, his lawyer, and allow consequences to teach the lessons money never could. The thought of Darius's humbling experiences, losing his home, his car, and the respect of those around him was difficult, but I knew it was necessary. In the past, my own heart had been broken by his actions, and the bitterness I carried now was mingled with hope that he might finally understand the value of responsibility. Eli's hand tightened slightly on mine, as if sensing the whirlwind of conflicting emotions inside me. I opened my eyes and met his gaze, finding reassurance there, a silent confirmation that I was not alone in this decision. I reminded myself that real love required boundaries, that sometimes the greatest act of care was not to rescue, but to guide indirectly, to empower through consequence rather than enable through handouts. My mind drifted to the memories of Darius as a child, the innocence, the trust, the moments when I believed my love could shield him from anything. How far had that trust been betrayed? The tears I had been holding back now threatened to spill, but I fought them back, determined to maintain composure. I had learned the hard way that strength was not the absence of emotion, but the mastery over how it was channeled. My gaze wandered across the skyline again, each twinkling light a reminder of the world's vastness, of the countless lives being lived simultaneously, full of struggles, choices, and lessons yet to be learned. I thought about the steps ahead, ensuring the children were protected, coordinating with Mark, and monitoring Darius's situation without enabling him. It was a delicate balance, one that demanded patience, resolve, and unwavering clarity. I inhaled deeply, letting the cool night air fill my lungs, centering myself for the difficult path that lay ahead. The knowledge that my son's pride and recklessness could bring him to ruin was painful, but the realization that allowing him to face these consequences could lead to growth filled me with a strange hope. Eli leaned closer, his presence both comforting and grounding, reminding me that while the road was painful, it was not one I had to walk alone. I touched the pendant around my neck absent-mindedly, a symbol of resilience, and whispered to myself that no matter the outcome, love did not have to mean indulgence. Sometimes love meant letting go of control, allowing reality to teach lessons that I could not impart through wealth or influence. My heart ached with the knowledge of what was to come, but beneath the ache was a quiet confidence that the right course, though painful, would ultimately lead to redemption and understanding. I reminded myself that every choice I made now, every boundary I enforced, was an act of both protection and instruction. It was not abandonment, it was preparation for the life lessons he desperately needed to embrace. I felt the weight of both sorrow and resolve settle over me like a cloak. The night stretched on, heavy and quiet, but for the first time in weeks I felt a sense of purpose cutting through the chaos. I knew what had to be done, and though the road ahead would be difficult, I was ready to face it, one decision at a time, with love and strength guiding me forward. The following morning brought no relief from the heaviness that had settled in my chest. I woke to the gentle hum of the ocean waves outside our villa, their rhythmic sound usually calming, now only emphasizing the turbulence within me. Eli was already awake, sitting near the balcony with a cup of coffee, gazing at the horizon as if searching for answers among the endless expanse of blue. I joined him silently, choosing not to speak because words felt inadequate to convey the whirlwind of worry, anger, and maternal concern swirling inside me. Thoughts of Darius gnawed at me, a constant presence even in the beauty surrounding us. How had my son, once so innocent and trusting, become so lost in entitlement and recklessness? I remembered his childhood vividly, the way he used to cling to my hand, eyes wide with curiosity and innocence, believing the world was safe simply because I was there. And now, the same boy, no, the man he had become, was drowning in debt, manipulation, and the consequences of years of indulgence. I thought of Tasha, who had allowed her greed to poison our family, spending recklessly and encouraging Darius's habits without regard for reality. It was astonishing to me how easily people could prioritize material desires over love, relationships, and personal responsibility. Eli's hand found mine again, grounding me, reminding me that despite my son's failures, I was not powerless, nor was I alone. He had orchestrated a plan with Mark, ensuring that Darius's situation could be managed, that his legal safety and the children's protection were secured without giving in to the emotional manipulation that had plagued me for years. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply, and allowed myself a moment to acknowledge that even love had limits, that boundaries were a form of protection, not rejection. The messages Darius had sent flooded my mind once more, each one dripping with self-interest, disguised as concern or apology, each one demanding something without offering true remorse. I shuddered at the thought of how easily he tried to leverage my love and recent marriage for financial gain. How had he learned to manipulate so well? And yet, beneath the anger and disappointment, a part of me still mourned the son I had known, the boy who had looked at me with trust and expectation. I reminded myself that the man in front of me now was a product of his choices, his environment, and his repeated indulgence. I had to distinguish the child I had raised from the adult he had become. The two were no longer the same. Eli, sensing my inner conflict, spoke softly, suggesting that perhaps we should take a measured approach, observe, support from a distance, but never enable. I nodded, realizing the wisdom in his words, though my heart ached with the desire to rescue my child from the storm he had willingly entered. The thought of the creditors, those men with no conscience, no patience, only the threat of violence, tightened a knot in my stomach. I knew that intervention required precision, not emotion, and that the plan Eli had devised with Mark was the only way to safeguard Darius without feeding his destructive habits. The idea of him facing consequences was both terrifying and necessary. I remembered the humiliation at my wedding, the public spectacle that Darius had created, fueled by jealousy and arrogance. 400 people had watched him belittle me, challenge my choices, and attempt to tarnish my dignity. And now his desperation had reached a peak where the consequences of his arrogance and entitlement were undeniable. Despite everything, part of me longed to run to him, to shield him, to tell him that love could still protect him. But I knew that would only postpone the lessons he needed to internalize. Sometimes the hardest decisions were acts of love disguised as firmness. I reflected on the irony. The very lessons I wanted him to learn, humility, responsibility, respect, could only be absorbed through failure, struggle, and discomfort. I had always been his protector, smoothing every path, but Eli's presence reminded me that protection could take many forms, some of which did not involve immediate rescue. I opened my eyes to the horizon again, seeing not just the beauty of the sea, but the vastness of life itself, with all its challenges and unpredictable twists. My gaze shifted inward, considering the role I had played, the choices I had made, and the balance between maternal instinct and necessary detachment. Could I truly allow my son to face the depths of his mistakes, knowing that I had the power to spare him pain? The answer was painful, yet clear. Yes, because real growth could not occur without confrontation with reality. Eli, sensing my inner dialogue, reminded me gently that my strength lay not in shielding Darius from every hardship, but in providing a framework for recovery, a safety net that required effort, accountability, and understanding of consequences. I understood then that true compassion was not always comforting. Sometimes it was the courage to say no, the wisdom to allow learning through experience. The thought of Darius alone in his apartment, the threats from loan sharks looming over him, made my chest tighten, but I reminded myself that Mark had taken measures to protect him and the children, ensuring that physical danger would be mitigated. What remained was the lesson, the confrontation with reality that money alone could never solve. I remembered his messages again, his requests for immediate assistance, his attempts to manipulate with emotional pleas. Each one was a reflection of his character, a snapshot of the person he had become. And yet, beneath that, I believed a spark of the son I had raised still existed, buried under years of indulgence, arrogance, and fear. My heart ached with the complexity of it all. Anger at the manipulation, sorrow for the lost innocence, fear for his safety, and hope that the confrontation with consequences would lead to redemption. I reached for my phone, composing a brief message to Mark to check on the latest developments, each word careful, precise, measured. The world outside continued its rhythm, unaware of the internal storms raging within me. I sipped my coffee slowly, the warmth a small comfort against the cold clarity I had gained. The path ahead was necessary, and I would walk it with strength, patience, and unwavering resolve. Eli moved closer, resting his head on my shoulder, a silent partnership in facing the challenges ahead. We did not need words. The bond we shared allowed us to understand each other fully, the unspoken agreement that we would face difficulties together, with strategy and heart intertwined. My thoughts wandered back to Darius one last time before I set my mind fully on the day ahead. He was facing the consequences he had created, yet I knew that with proper guidance, accountability, and time, there remained a possibility for him to emerge wiser, more responsible, and ultimately reconciled with the person he once was. I took another deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle into a quiet determination. Love, I realized, was as much about restraint as it was about indulgence, as much about patience as it was about action. And with that understanding, I allowed myself a moment of peace, knowing that the decisions I made now would shape not only Darius's future, but the integrity of my own life and the lessons I hoped to impart. The following days were a delicate balance of calm and tension, as if the world itself was holding its breath in anticipation of what would unfold. Every morning I awoke to the soft sunlight spilling across our villa, painting the walls in warm golden hues, yet the serenity of our surroundings could not quiet the constant pull of worry in my heart. Darius occupied my thoughts relentlessly. His mistakes, arrogance, and the consequences he now faced were impossible to ignore. I reflected on the stark contrast between the life he had chosen and the life Eli and I now led. A life of stability, purpose, and genuine connection, built not on impulsive indulgence, but on careful planning and shared values. Eli remained my anchor throughout these days, always aware of the fragile emotional state I was navigating, offering quiet words of support, a gentle hand on my shoulder, or simply the reassuring presence of his calm demeanor. We spoke often of strategy, of how best to monitor Darius's situation without directly intervening in ways that would undermine the lessons he needed to learn. Mark kept us informed, providing meticulous updates on Darius's creditors, legal challenges, and the steps being taken to ensure that his children remained safe and uninfluenced by the chaos. Each report brought a mixture of relief and anguish. Relief that no immediate danger threatened Miles and Chloe, anguish at seeing my son's life unravel due to his choices. Despite the chaos, I resolved to maintain my composure, knowing that emotional reactions could cloud judgment and potentially worsen the situation. I thought of the messages Darius had sent, each one dripping with entitlement, guilt-tripping language, and appeals to familial duty. He had assumed that my maternal instincts alone would compel me to provide financial rescue, ignoring the need for accountability, integrity, and personal growth. I realized that in allowing him to confront the reality of his actions, I was providing a greater, albeit more painful, form of love than unconditional rescue. Eli often reminded me that my strength as a mother was not diminished by setting boundaries, by refusing to allow past patterns of manipulation to dictate the present. Each day I practiced this restraint, knowing that true empowerment lay in measured action and moral clarity. During our quiet moments on the balcony, watching the sun rise over the vast ocean, I contemplated the journey that had led me here, from public humiliation and betrayal to the discovery of inner strength, love, and renewed purpose. I reflected on the irony of life's lessons. Sometimes the most profound acts of care involve stepping back, allowing those we love to experience the consequences of their choices, and trusting that the guidance we provide from a distance will shape their future in meaningful ways. I thought of Darius again, imagining him in his cramped, disorderly apartment, facing the relentless pressure of creditors, the erosion of relationships, and the stark reality of having to rebuild from nothing. The mental image was painful, yet necessary, for it reinforced the reasons behind my decisions. I could not allow sympathy to override justice. Compassion had to coexist with accountability. Each evening, after the sun dipped below the horizon and the villa was bathed in soft twilight, I found myself reflecting on my own resilience. The events of the past months had tested every fiber of my being, my patience, my sense of justice, my capacity for forgiveness, and my emotional endurance. And yet, here I was, standing firm, guided by clarity and the unwavering support of Eli, who never let me feel isolated in my struggles. We discussed potential scenarios for Darius's recovery, from legal recourse to financial restructuring, and the importance of him acknowledging the gravity of his mistakes. It became evident that any shortcut would only perpetuate the patterns that had brought him to this low point. I realized that what he needed was not just material assistance, but an understanding of responsibility, respect, and the consequences of choices made without thought for others. In private moments, I allowed myself to grieve the son I had lost, the innocence, trust, and joy that had once defined our relationship. These emotions were natural, yet they had to be processed without clouding the necessary decisions I had to make. Eli's quiet guidance reminded me that mourning the past and shaping the future could coexist as long as I remained focused on integrity and principled action. Over time, a routine emerged, mornings spent in reflection, afternoons reviewing updates from Mark, evenings discussing strategy with Eli, and nights allowing myself the rare moments of emotional release. Each day brought incremental clarity, reinforcing my conviction that the path I had chosen, allowing Darius to face the consequences while ensuring the safety of his children, was the right one. The lesson, I realized, was not just for him, but for me. The strength to uphold one's principles in the face of emotional appeals, manipulation, and familial pressure was a testament to personal growth and resilience. Slowly, I began to understand the depth of the transformation required, not just for Darius, but for me as a mother and as an individual navigating complex moral terrain. I acknowledged the duality of love and discipline, recognizing that the two were not mutually exclusive, but intertwined in the pursuit of meaningful growth and long-term reconciliation. Eli remained a constant presence, a reminder that partnership and support could enhance strength rather than diminish it. Together, we faced the uncertainty of the coming days with a shared sense of purpose and determination, knowing that the path forward, though difficult, was guided by clarity, morality, and a commitment to fostering genuine change. As the days passed, I began to notice subtle shifts in my perspective, moments of calm replacing anxiety, and an appreciation for the lessons embedded in adversity. I realized that while Darius's journey was painful to observe, it offered me profound insights into patience, resilience, and the nature of true love, the kind that guides without enabling, that nurtures without shielding from accountability. I understood that the challenges before us were not obstacles to happiness, but opportunities for growth, transformation, and the reaffirmation of values that mattered most. The image of Darius struggling, facing the consequences of his actions, was no longer solely a source of fear and worry, but also a testament to the potential for redemption should he embrace the lessons offered to him. And in that understanding, I found a measure of peace, a sense of purpose, and the courage to continue navigating the delicate balance between love, accountability, and hope for the future. Darius's situation continued to dominate my thoughts, even as Eli and I tried to focus on our honeymoon and the fleeting moments of peace we could steal for ourselves. The private island with its pristine beaches and lush greenery was a paradise in every sense, yet my mind could not entirely let go of the weight of responsibility I felt as a mother. Each morning I awoke to the sound of gentle waves lapping against the shore, a rhythmic reminder of the world's constancy, yet inside my thoughts swirled like turbulent currents. I kept reminding myself that the life I now led with Eli at my side was the product of patience, resilience, and the careful navigation of challenges that had once seemed insurmountable. Yet, The contrast between our serene environment and the chaos Darius was facing could not be more stark. I could almost feel the tension emanating from his apartment across the city, the anxiety, the sleepless nights, and the crushing weight of financial ruin pressing down on him. The thought of him and Tasha and their fractured family occupied my mind constantly. I reflected on all the opportunities he had wasted, the choices he had made driven by arrogance, greed, and short-sightedness, and I understood more than ever that his current predicament was the natural outcome of a life lived without accountability. Eli, ever perceptive, noticed my preoccupation. He placed a gentle hand on mine during breakfast one morning, his presence a silent reminder that I was not alone in carrying the emotional burden. "You're doing the right thing," he said softly. "Sometimes love isn't about giving what's asked, but giving what's truly needed." His words resonated deeply, reinforcing my belief that my decision to withhold financial aid was not cruelty, but an act of profound love. We spent the days walking along the beach, exploring hidden coves and discussing strategies for Darius's recovery from a distance, all while maintaining the illusion of normalcy and joy on our vacation. Yet every update from Mark pulled me back to reality. Darius's creditors were relentless. They had begun repossessing his assets, freezing his bank accounts, and threatening legal action. The collapse of his lifestyle was now undeniable, and I had to confront the emotions that came with witnessing my son face such hardships. The maternal instinct to protect, to rescue, was powerful, but I knew that intervention would only prevent the growth and understanding he desperately needed. The challenge was balancing compassion with discipline, and I relied heavily on Eli and Mark to ensure I did not lose sight of this principle. Mark's updates were thorough, detailing each action taken to safeguard Miles and Chloe, to prevent physical harm, and to manage Darius's mounting debts legally. I found solace in knowing that while the emotional turmoil was mine to bear, the practical aspects of safety and legal protection were in competent hands. Even so, I could not ignore the gnawing concern for my son's well-being. I thought about the messages he had sent, each one an attempt to manipulate or guilt me into acting against my own judgment. It was a bitter pill to swallow, recognizing that the person I had nurtured, the son I had loved unconditionally, had so easily traded genuine connection for monetary gain and superficial advantage. Eli reminded me that acknowledging this reality was crucial. It was the first step in breaking the cycle of entitlement and manipulation that had dominated Darius's behavior for years. Every night I allowed myself a private moment of reflection. I would sit on the balcony overlooking the turquoise waters, the moonlight casting shimmering patterns across the ocean, and contemplate the lessons embedded in this painful situation. I realized that my journey was as much about personal growth as it was about guiding Darius toward accountability. I learned patience, emotional discipline, and the necessity of maintaining boundaries even with those we love most. The path of growth is often accompanied by discomfort, and this was a lesson I embraced fully, understanding that enabling behavior under the guise of compassion only postpones true understanding and change. I considered Darius's potential reactions, imagining the mixture of frustration, desperation, and fear he must be experiencing. Yet I understood that this confrontation with reality was essential for him to cultivate empathy, responsibility, and self-awareness. Eli's unwavering support reminded me that I did not have to carry the weight of these emotions alone. He provided perspective, a calm assessment of every update, and reassurance that our choices were aligned with long-term good rather than short-term comfort. I reflected on the irony of life, that the hardest acts of love often involve stepping back, allowing those we care about to face the consequences of their own actions. My maternal instincts battled with rational judgment daily, yet the clarity I gained from conscious reflection and support enabled me to make decisions that were difficult but necessary. The days passed slowly, each one bringing incremental updates from Mark. Darius's apartment was now stripped of luxury, his credit cards frozen, and his social connections fractured. The consequences of his actions were becoming painfully tangible, yet he remained unaware that these experiences were the crucible in which his character would be tested and reshaped. I pondered how these trials, though harsh, could become the foundation for a transformation he might never have achieved through privilege or interference. In these moments, I also considered my own evolution. The public humiliation at the wedding, the betrayal, and the ensuing challenges had forced me to confront vulnerabilities and insecurities I had previously ignored. I realized that true strength emerges not in moments of comfort, but in navigating adversity while maintaining integrity, composure, and purpose. The experience of balancing maternal care with the need for accountability became a profound lesson in self-respect, empathy, and principled decision-making. As I observed the gentle sway of the palm trees and the serene horizon, I recognized that life was rarely linear. Growth often requires discomfort, patience, and courage. I understood that my role was not to shield Darius from the natural consequences of his actions, but to guide him, support him from a safe distance, and ensure the well-being of his children. I reconciled the conflicting emotions within me, understanding that love and discipline are not mutually exclusive but interdependent forces essential for meaningful growth. Darius's journey was a test for both of us, and the lessons learned would shape our future interactions, our relationship, and the values he would carry forward. In accepting this responsibility, I found a renewed sense of purpose, clarity, and resilience, readying myself for the day when confrontation, reconciliation, and understanding would come to pass. The days that followed brought a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. On one hand, the honeymoon with Eli continued to provide moments of peace and genuine connection, a sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world. The private island, with its endless stretches of white sand and crystal-clear waters, seemed almost otherworldly, as if it existed in a bubble entirely detached from reality. Yet my thoughts repeatedly returned to Darius, to the crumbling life he was facing and the consequences of his long-standing irresponsibility. I could not ignore the mental images of him pacing his tiny apartment, the weight of fear and desperation evident in every movement, every trembling gesture. I imagined him staring at the ceiling at night, thinking of the looming deadlines, the threats from loan sharks, the potential loss of his children's trust and love. These were the harsh realities that I had refused to shield him from, and while it pained me, I knew that facing them was exactly what he needed. Eli noticed the strain on my face, and often in the quiet moments when the sun dipped below the horizon, he would take my hand and reassure me, his calm presence acting as a stabilizing force. "You're doing what's best for him, Ellie," he would say softly, his eyes filled with understanding. "It's hard, but this is how he will truly grow." And I clung to that reminder, finding strength in the knowledge that my choices, though emotionally taxing, were rooted in love, not cruelty. Mark continued to provide detailed updates about Darius's situation. The repossession of his assets had begun in earnest. His luxury car was towed, his credit cards were frozen, and the house he shared with Tasha and the children had been placed in foreclosure. Every message from Mark painted a vivid picture of the collapse of a life built on arrogance and entitlement, and I found myself alternating between relief and sorrow. Relief because the security and well-being of Miles and Chloe were intact, carefully safeguarded by Mark's network of professionals, and sorrow because my son, despite his faults, was experiencing the pain of his choices so acutely. I wrestled with the motherly urge to intervene, to provide a cushion, a safety net that would soften the harshness of reality. But I knew, with clarity reinforced by Eli and Mark, that such intervention would only prolong the pattern of avoidance and entitlement that had dominated Darius's life for years. The daily updates were not merely about finances or legal maneuvers, they were lessons in observing the consequences of behavior and understanding how patterns of thought, decision-making, and emotional maturity intersect to shape outcomes. I reflected deeply on how the events of the past months had forced me to redefine my understanding of love, responsibility, and boundaries. The public humiliation at the wedding, the constant manipulation, and Darius's repeated mistakes had created a crucible in which my emotional strength and clarity were tested repeatedly. In navigating these challenges, I realized that true maternal love does not always mean giving what is asked, but giving what is truly necessary for growth, even when it is painful. I remembered the series of messages Darius had sent to Eli, each one dripping with entitlement, expectation, and subtle manipulation, and I understood that these were expressions of a character that needed shaping, not indulgence. The notion that protection equates love had been firmly challenged. It became clear that withholding immediate financial aid was not a lack of care, but an intentional act of teaching and guiding, a way to instill accountability. Each night, I found solace in writing down my reflections, documenting the juxtaposition of my current life of luxury and security with Darius's unfolding crisis. These writings were not only therapeutic, but also a method of crystallizing lessons I wished to retain and eventually impart. I considered the irony of how the universe balanced experiences. I had been publicly humiliated, yet found a love and stability I had never known. Darius had indulged in arrogance and materialism, yet was now facing the sobering reality of what his choices had wrought. It struck me that growth often comes wrapped in discomfort, that lessons of the deepest magnitude are learned through struggle, loss, and reflection. Eli continued to provide emotional and practical support, reminding me that I was not alone in navigating this delicate situation. He offered strategic insights on maintaining boundaries while still ensuring the safety of all parties involved, and he emphasized the importance of clarity in communication with both Mark and Darius. I began to appreciate that leadership, whether in a family or in business, often involves difficult decisions that may temporarily strain relationships, but ultimately serve long-term well-being and growth. Mark's management of Darius's legal and financial situation was exemplary. He orchestrated the steps necessary to prevent physical harm, manage debts systematically, and initiate a structured approach to bankruptcy. His updates provided a window into the process, highlighting both the practical and emotional dimensions of Darius's journey. While I could not intervene directly without undermining the lessons at hand, I remained emotionally engaged, analyzing each step with care and reflection. I pondered the depth of human behavior, the ways in which privilege, entitlement, and fear shape choices, and how accountability serves as a counterbalance to prevent destructive cycles from perpetuating indefinitely. In my moments of introspection, I realized that my own growth was intertwined with Darius's. The discipline I exercised in setting boundaries, the courage required to resist immediate impulses of intervention, and the clarity gained from strategic reflection were shaping a stronger, more resilient self. I understood that personal strength is not measured merely by external accomplishments, but by the ability to navigate complex emotional landscapes with integrity, patience, and foresight. Each interaction, update, and reflection reinforced the necessity of maintaining principles even when emotionally difficult. I accepted that love and discipline were not contradictory but complementary, and that the capacity to act with long-term vision rather than short-term relief is a hallmark of wisdom. The contrast between the serene beauty of the Caribbean, the life of comfort I shared with Eli, and the stark reality of Darius's struggles provided a daily reminder of life's dualities. I learned to inhabit both worlds simultaneously, embracing peace and joy where possible while remaining cognizant of responsibilities and consequences elsewhere. This awareness fostered a depth of perspective and empathy that transcended simple emotional responses, allowing for measured, purposeful action rooted in understanding rather than reaction. As the days unfolded, I contemplated the nature of forgiveness, growth, and accountability. Darius's situation was a test for him, undoubtedly, but it was also a profound opportunity for me to exercise discernment, patience, and principled love. I understood that genuine transformation emerges not from instant rescue, but from enduring the discomfort necessary to confront mistakes and rebuild with conscious intention. The lessons extended beyond my relationship with Darius. They were reflections on human nature, familial bonds, and the nuanced balance between care and responsibility. I recognized the immense value of preparing the next generation, ensuring that lessons learned from past errors inform future choices, and cultivating an environment in which accountability, integrity, and emotional maturity are prioritized. I accepted that the emotional turbulence accompanying this period was not merely an obstacle, but a conduit for profound growth, resilience, and understanding. In accepting these challenges, I found clarity, strength, and a renewed sense of purpose, confident that Darius's journey, though painful, was leading toward a meaningful transformation. The combination of careful oversight by Mark, unwavering support from Eli, and my own disciplined engagement created a foundation from which Darius could eventually rebuild, learn, and perhaps, in time, understand the depth of maternal love that is expressed not in instant gratification, but in the fostering of responsibility, character, and resilience. The weeks that followed Darius's initial fall were some of the most difficult I had ever experienced. Each day carried a tension that was almost unbearable, the knowledge that my son was facing consequences of his actions, intertwined with the ever-present ache of a mother's worry. I reminded myself constantly that this was necessary, that growth, understanding, and true change rarely come without discomfort, without the sharp sting of reality. Even in the serene paradise I shared with Eli, with the sun-drenched beaches and crystal waters, the mental images of Darius navigating his shattered life intruded on my peace. I pictured him pacing his sparse apartment, counting every penny, feeling the cold weight of debt pressing down, and the pressure of being abandoned by those he had once relied on. Tasha's departure, the loss of his home, the repossession of possessions he had taken for granted, all were critical lessons, though they pained me to witness. I kept reminding myself that the greatest gift I could give Darius was not money or rescue, but the space to confront reality, to understand that actions have consequences. In the evenings, Eli would sit with me on the veranda, holding my hand as the horizon glowed with the last light of the day. He never minimized my emotions. He acknowledged the difficulty of the situation and offered calm guidance, reinforcing that the choices I made were grounded in love, not vengeance. His support gave me courage, the fortitude to resist the urge to intervene prematurely, and the clarity to maintain boundaries that Darius desperately wished I would cross. Mark's updates continued, meticulously detailing every development in Darius's legal and financial battles. The bankruptcy process, though humiliating for him, provided structure and a chance for Darius to rebuild properly. Each call or message from Mark described how debts were being reorganized, how creditors were managed, and how safety measures were enforced to ensure no physical harm could come to him or to the children. Reading these updates was emotionally exhausting, alternating between hope that he was learning and sorrow for the pain he endured. The contrast between the luxurious, secure life Eli and I shared and the stark reality of Darius's struggles struck me repeatedly. I reflected on how little understanding some people have of privilege and entitlement, and how easily comfort can obscure the lessons that hardship teaches. I thought about my own past, how I had navigated challenges with determination and learned resilience, and realized that Darius's journey, though difficult, mirrored the lessons life had forced upon me many years earlier. One evening, after a particularly long day of reflection, Eli suggested we engage in an exercise I hadn't considered before, documenting every detail of Darius's journey, not as a form of judgment, but as a record of learning, both for him and for me. He encouraged me to note my emotional responses, the challenges, the victories, and the moments of clarity, framing them as a narrative of growth and accountability. I began to write, initially hesitantly, recounting every decision, every consequence, every interaction with Darius and the professionals assisting him. The process was cathartic, allowing me to process layers of grief, disappointment, and lingering maternal instinct. As I wrote, I realized that my strength was not merely in making tough decisions, but in understanding the emotional landscape and navigating it with compassion and resolve. Eli observed silently as I poured my thoughts onto the pages, offering gentle encouragement only when necessary, reminding me that this was a journey of both observation and emotional clarity. I found myself noting patterns, how Darius relied on manipulation rather than communication, how he prioritized material wealth over relationships, and how, without intervention, he had no framework for understanding the long-term consequences of his behavior. Each note reinforced why the path of non-intervention in financial matters was so critical. Yet the entries also captured moments of humanity, fleeting glimpses of the boy he had been, the son I had raised, the potential for growth if guided correctly. The writing forced me to reconcile my love for him with the necessity of boundaries, a delicate balancing act that Eli continuously helped me navigate. In those weeks, the island, the luxury, and the beauty surrounding us became both a sanctuary and a mirror. It reflected the stark duality of human experience, serenity and struggle, love and disappointment, growth and consequence. I realized that life rarely offers absolutes. Even in wealth and comfort, emotional complexity persists, just as hardship brings clarity and lessons alongside suffering. Every morning, as the sunlight touched the water, I reminded myself of my role, not as a savior, not as a rescuer, but as a guide and observer, ensuring that Darius faced the reality he had helped create. I meditated on how responsibility, accountability, and integrity intersect, and how essential it was for Darius to internalize these principles independently. The process was painstaking, often leaving me emotionally drained, yet there was a deep satisfaction in witnessing the slow emergence of understanding in him. Weeks turned into months, and gradually Darius began to show signs of internal change. He reached out through Mark to discuss the practicalities of bankruptcy, demonstrating a willingness to follow advice rather than demand instant solutions. He began to acknowledge his mistakes, not just superficially, but with reflection and self-awareness, though still awkwardly and inconsistently. These small gestures, barely noticeable to an outside observer, were monumental for someone who had previously relied on manipulation and entitlement. Each interaction, each report from Mark reinforced a value of consequence-driven growth, teaching me that patience and measured restraint often produce outcomes more profound than immediate intervention. Eli remained my anchor, offering wisdom and emotional grounding throughout the process. He helped me distinguish between my desire to alleviate suffering and the necessity of allowing natural consequences to take effect. Through his presence, I learned that love is not synonymous with enabling, and that true care sometimes requires watching someone endure the difficulty they must confront. I began to see that this period was transforming not only Darius, but myself. I was becoming more confident in my judgments, more capable of balancing love with discipline, and more aware of the subtle ways in which personal growth is nurtured. Observing Darius navigate the collapse of his previous life became a case study in human behavior, entitlement, and resilience. I reflected on the societal lessons embedded within this personal experience, the impact of materialism, the dangers of arrogance, and the transformative potential of facing consequences directly. Each legal and financial maneuver orchestrated by Mark was a step toward rebuilding Darius's wife with integrity, emphasizing that structured guidance and adherence to principles can coexist with empathy and care. I began to anticipate the moments when Darius would demonstrate genuine understanding, preparing myself emotionally to acknowledge his progress without undermining the lessons learned. Slowly, I started to envision a future where he could emerge as a responsible, thoughtful, and empathetic individual. The juxtaposition of our lives, the tranquil paradise and his struggle, served as a constant reminder that growth often requires facing the harsh realities of life, that love must sometimes be expressed through restraint, and that transformation is rarely instantaneous. I realized that in these moments, I was witnessing the profound interplay between consequence and redemption, between accountability and the nurturing of potential. And as each day passed, I felt a mixture of sorrow, hope, and anticipation, understanding that this journey, though painful, was creating the foundation for something lasting, both for Darius and for myself. I resolved to continue this careful balance, maintaining boundaries, providing guidance where necessary, and observing with a clear mind and an open heart, knowing that true transformation is earned through challenge, reflection, and unwavering honesty. As the months progressed, Darius's transformation became increasingly tangible, though subtle, like the first hints of spring after a long, harsh winter. Each day brought new challenges, forcing him to confront not only the tangible consequences of his actions, but the intangible lessons that come from personal responsibility. He had lost material comfort, yet the intangible assets, self-respect, awareness, and humility, began to take root. I watched through Mark's detailed updates as Darius approached each obstacle with an emerging sense of accountability, a stark contrast to the entitlement that had defined his earlier life. He no longer sought quick fixes or demanded handouts. Instead, he engaged with the professionals guiding him, asking questions and demonstrating a willingness to learn. These small, measured steps were monumental in their significance, marking the shift from dependence to self-reliance. I could feel the tension between my maternal instinct and the hard necessity of restraint gradually easing, replaced by cautious optimism. Eli remained my constant anchor, providing both emotional support and strategic guidance. He reminded me repeatedly that while the journey was Darius's to walk, my role was to observe, to ensure safety, and to provide counsel only when appropriate. It was a delicate balance, requiring patience and fortitude, especially when the urge to intervene and resolve problems for Darius was almost overwhelming. I found myself reflecting on the nature of true love, realizing that it often manifests through difficult choices, ones that prioritize growth over immediate comfort. Through Mark's meticulous updates, I learned of Darius's efforts to rebuild his financial foundation. He began budgeting meticulously, tracking expenses, and prioritizing essentials over luxury, a stark contrast to his former lifestyle of reckless indulgence. The apartment that once seemed suffocating and chaotic gradually transformed into a space of order and modest comfort, reflecting his commitment to change. Each small accomplishment became a marker of growth, paying a utility bill on time, settling a minor debt, or completing a daily work assignment diligently. While these may have seemed trivial to an outsider, to me they represented the foundational steps toward responsibility and integrity. Observing this, I realized that transformation is rarely instantaneous. It is incremental, requiring persistence, reflection, and the humility to accept guidance. Darius's emotional evolution mirrored his practical changes. He began to acknowledge his past mistakes, not just with words, but with actions that demonstrated understanding and remorse. He reached out to people he had previously wronged, attempting to mend relationships where possible, and, importantly, refrained from attempts to manipulate or evade accountability. This behavioral shift was reinforced by the structured support Eli and Mark provided, ensuring that lessons were internalized rather than temporarily acted upon for expediency. I also noticed shifts in his communication with Tasha and the children. While fraught with difficulty, he approached co-parenting with patience and sincerity, recognizing that rebuilding trust required consistent effort, not grand gestures. Each call or message was carefully considered, reflecting a growing awareness of the impact his words and actions had on others. It was a painful process, filled with reminders of his previous failures, yet it demonstrated a willingness to confront the past honestly. I felt a cautious pride, tempered by the understanding that this journey was ongoing and that setbacks were inevitable. Eli's presence was invaluable throughout this period. He offered strategic advice, emotional support, and perspective, helping me maintain clarity and prevent my own emotions from dictating actions that might undermine Darius's growth. He reminded me that the goal was not punishment, but transformation, an understanding that allowed me to balance compassion with firmness. I observed moments where Darius's frustration and despair threatened to derail progress, yet he persevered, demonstrating resilience that I had not witnessed previously. These moments reinforced the importance of facing consequences fully. Without the reality of loss, he could not have developed the resilience and perspective now emerging. Each day, I reflected on the paradox of love and consequence, understanding that permitting someone to endure hardship is itself an act of care. I realized that Darius's transformation required both the lessons of pain and the steady presence of guidance, neither of which could be substituted by material rescue. Slowly, I began to envision a future where Darius could re-enter our lives with a renewed sense of purpose, responsibility, and empathy. I imagined him interacting with the grandchildren not as an entitled figure seeking convenience, but as a present, thoughtful parent and grandparent who understood the value of relationships over material wealth. The thought filled me with hope and tempered the lingering fear that past behaviors might repeat. Weeks turned into months, and the consistent application of structure, accountability, and guidance yielded observable results. Darius began seeking advice proactively, demonstrating an understanding of the practical and emotional dimensions of his actions. He engaged in constructive conversations with Mark and Eli, discussing strategies to stabilize finances, improve personal relationships, and regain trust. The process was slow, often punctuated by moments of doubt, but it revealed the emergence of introspection and maturity that had been absent. I witnessed the transformation from entitlement to awareness, from impulsiveness to deliberation, and from self-centeredness to consideration of others. Even minor victories, such as successfully negotiating a repayment plan or taking responsibility for a misstep, carried enormous significance, representing the scaffolding upon which a more responsible life could be built. My own emotional journey paralleled his. I grappled with the tension between the desire to forgive and the need to maintain boundaries that reinforced learning. I processed feelings of guilt, relief, pride, and sorrow, understanding that personal growth often requires confronting complex emotional landscapes. Eli's calm presence enabled me to navigate these turbulent waters, reminding me that patience, observation, and strategic restraint were the greatest gifts I could offer. Together, we celebrated small achievements, marked milestones quietly, and discussed progress openly, reinforcing the importance of reflection and accountability. By the end of the 4th month, the changes were undeniable. Darius exhibited consistency in both action and attitude, acknowledging errors, seeking constructive solutions, and interacting with the children and Tasha with greater empathy. He no longer sought to manipulate or shortcut consequences. Instead, he embraced responsibility as a path to redemption. This evolution, though still fragile, demonstrated the profound impact of structured guidance, patient observation, and the natural consequences of one's actions. I realized that these months of struggle, observation, and careful intervention had forged a stronger, wiser individual, one who had learned the value of relationships over materialism, of accountability over entitlement, and of humility over arrogance. I also recognized the enduring power of patience, compassion, and principled action in effecting meaningful change. As the island sunsets bathed the horizon in golden light, I reflected on the journey, understanding that true love often involves stepping back, allowing space for growth, and trusting that lessons endured are lessons learned. Darius's emerging transformation was a testament to resilience, accountability, and the profound capacity for change, reinforcing that the most enduring lessons in life are those learned through experience, reflection, and unwavering guidance. And as I watched the gentle waves lap against the shore, I felt a cautious, profound hope. Hope that Darius would continue on this path, hope that relationships could be repaired, and hope that the next chapter of our lives would be defined not by past mistakes, but by the conscious choices made in their aftermath. Each step he took was a reminder that even in the most challenging circumstances, change is possible, growth is attainable, and redemption can be earned through sincerity, perseverance, and the courage to face one's own failings head-on. Months had passed since my confrontation with Darius, and the tension that had defined our relationship gradually began to shift, replaced by cautious optimism and tentative trust. The changes in him were subtle at first, barely noticeable to anyone outside the situation, yet they were profoundly significant to those who had witnessed the earlier chaos. Every small decision he made reflected a deeper understanding of consequences and responsibility, a direct result of the challenges he had faced and the guidance he had received. Darius's financial habits, once reckless and impulsive, had become methodical and disciplined. He tracked every expense meticulously, distinguishing between needs and wants, and prioritized saving over indulgence. The luxuries he had previously considered essential now seemed frivolous, a relic of a mindset he no longer wished to embrace. I observed these changes with a mixture of relief and cautious pride, understanding that growth requires both time and perseverance, and that relapses were possible but not inevitable. Eli continued to play a pivotal role, offering perspective, advice, and emotional support, ensuring that my decisions were guided by reason rather than emotion. He reminded me that while my maternal instincts were powerful, restraint was often the most loving choice, allowing Darius to face the natural consequences of his actions. Each time I received updates from Mark, I felt the weight of responsibility and the delicate balance required to navigate the situation. Darius was no longer seeking shortcuts or handouts. He approached problems with a measured determination, seeking advice but taking ownership of the solutions. This shift in attitude marked the emergence of accountability and a growing awareness of the impact of his actions on others. Beyond financial responsibility, Darius also began addressing the emotional wounds caused by his previous behavior. He reached out to Tasha with sincerity and patience, seeking to establish a cooperative relationship for the sake of the children. While Tasha's responses were initially guarded, she gradually recognized the sincerity in his efforts and began to engage in structured, respectful communication. The children, Miles and Chloe, began to witness their father's transformation, experiencing interactions marked by consistency, attention, and genuine care. I realized that these incremental changes were the foundation of rebuilding trust, and that the presence of supportive adults, Eli, Mark, and myself, was critical in reinforcing these lessons. In addition to familial responsibilities, Darius also addressed the reputational damage caused by his earlier actions. The attempt to sell our story to the media had failed, leaving him without the shortcuts he once relied upon. He approached this setback with an unexpected maturity, recognizing that authenticity, transparency, and consistent effort were far more valuable than sensationalized narratives. Each day, he engaged with his personal and professional life with a renewed sense of integrity, understanding that rebuilding trust requires time, effort, and visible consistency. The bankruptcy proceedings, initially a source of humiliation and fear, became an opportunity for education and growth. Guided by Mark's expertise, Darius learned to navigate legal complexities, negotiate effectively, and plan for a sustainable financial future. These lessons, though challenging, equipped him with skills and perspectives that were far more enduring than any temporary financial rescue could have provided. I found myself reflecting on the paradoxical nature of love and discipline. True care often involves letting go, stepping back, and allowing the natural consequences of actions to guide growth. While it was painful to witness Darius struggle, I understood that each hardship was an essential step toward maturity, empathy, and resilience. Eli's unwavering support provided stability and perspective, reminding me that strategic patience is often the greatest form of support one can offer. Slowly, Darius's demeanor began to shift from desperation to determination. He approached each task with a level of focus and deliberation that had been absent in the past. Even setbacks, which previously would have triggered panic or avoidance, were now met with thoughtful problem-solving and a commitment to learn from mistakes. This transformation, though gradual, was unmistakable. Darius's engagement with the children, while still evolving, demonstrated a newfound empathy and patience. He listened attentively, responded thoughtfully, and sought to understand their perspectives, building the foundation for a more meaningful and constructive relationship. Tasha, while protective, began to acknowledge his efforts, and slowly, cautious interactions gave way to structured co-parenting arrangements. Observing this, I felt a profound mixture of hope and relief, recognizing that the lessons of humility, accountability, and responsibility were beginning to take root. As the weeks turned into months, Darius's efforts extended beyond personal and familial responsibilities. He began volunteering at local community centers, sharing his experiences with young adults facing similar financial or personal challenges. His message, rooted in authenticity and reflection, emphasized the importance of accountability, the consequences of materialism, and the value of relationships over possessions. Witnessing him teach others what he had learned reinforced the depth of his transformation and highlighted the ripple effect of lessons well learned. I reflected on the broader implications of this journey. The intersection of consequence, guidance, and personal responsibility created a framework for meaningful growth that no external intervention or material support could replicate. The transformation I observed in Darius was both emotional and practical, a testament to the enduring power of experience, reflection, and structured guidance. Eli's consistent presence ensured that I remained grounded, that I observed without overstepping, and that my decisions were informed rather than reactive. Together, we celebrated milestones quietly, acknowledging growth while maintaining the focus on sustained improvement. Darius's communication became increasingly honest and reflective. He no longer relied on manipulation or appeals to emotion. Instead, he articulated his needs and regrets with clarity and sincerity. Each conversation, each acknowledgement of past mistakes contributed to the rebuilding of trust and respect. Even when faced with lingering challenges, he demonstrated resilience, a willingness to learn, and a commitment to change that marked a profound departure from his previous behaviors. I realized that the transformation was not merely about correcting past mistakes, but about cultivating the skills, mindset, and empathy necessary for a sustainable, responsible, and meaningful life. As Darius continued to navigate these challenges, I observed a growing alignment between his actions and his intentions. His efforts to reconcile with family, rebuild financially, and contribute positively to the community reflected a comprehensive internal shift. While perfection was neither expected nor achieved, the trajectory was unmistakably upward. I found solace in witnessing his development, understanding that the deliberate application of consequences, combined with patient support and guidance, had produced measurable growth. Each moment of progress, no matter how small, reinforced the principle that meaningful transformation requires both effort and accountability. Through this journey, I deepened my understanding of love, responsibility, and the nuanced balance between compassion and discipline. Darius's evolution highlighted the complex interplay between choice, consequence, and opportunity, underscoring the importance of allowing individuals to experience the full weight of their actions. As I observed him in interviews, community engagement, and structured co-parenting sessions, I saw the emergence of a more thoughtful, empathetic, and responsible individual, capable of navigating challenges with integrity. The months of struggle, observation, and support had yielded tangible results, not only in his behavior but in his approach to relationships, responsibilities, and personal growth. I understood that this transformation, while ongoing, represented a fundamental shift in character, guided by the principles of accountability, resilience, and reflection. Each day reinforced the lesson that genuine change is cultivated through experience, guidance, and the willingness to confront one's failures directly. As I watched Darius engage meaningfully with others, balance priorities thoughtfully, and approach challenges with deliberation, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. The journey had been difficult, marked by emotional tension, careful observation, and unwavering guidance, yet it had produced measurable, profound change. I recognized the importance of patience, strategic support, and allowing natural consequences to foster growth. Through this process, Darius was not simply surviving, but learning, evolving, and demonstrating the potential for meaningful, enduring transformation. The interplay of love, discipline, and accountability had reshaped our relationship, establishing a foundation for renewed trust, respect, and mutual understanding. The lessons learned would extend beyond immediate circumstances, influencing behavior, mindset, and relationships for years to come. As I reflected on these months, I felt a profound sense of purpose and hope, knowing that the deliberate, thoughtful application of guidance and consequence could produce genuine growth, even in those who had once seemed lost. The journey was far from complete, but the progress was undeniable, illuminating the transformative power of accountability, patience, and principled intervention in the context of love, family, and personal responsibility. Watching Darius navigate these challenges with increasing maturity and thoughtfulness, I felt a sense of hope, tempered by the awareness that growth is a continuous process, shaped by experience, reflection, and the consistent application of lessons learned. Time moved forward with a rhythm that felt both relentless and restorative. Darius, once impulsive and reckless, had become increasingly deliberate in every choice he made, carefully considering the consequences before acting. His mornings began with structured routines. He reviewed his finances, organized his schedule, and prioritized meaningful engagements over trivial distractions. Gone were the days of hasty purchases and extravagant indulgences. Each decision reflected the discipline and foresight he had acquired through hardship and guidance. I watched him closely from a distance at first, cautious but hopeful, realizing that authentic growth is measured not by grand gestures, but by consistent, deliberate action over time. Eli continued to provide subtle guidance, offering insights when necessary, but allowing Darius the space to make independent decisions, reinforcing his sense of agency and responsibility. Mark remained a constant support in legal and financial matters, ensuring that Darius's progress was protected from external threats, while also teaching him how to navigate complex situations. Together, this support network created an environment where accountability, reflection, and growth could flourish, providing the structure he needed to rebuild his life. One of the most remarkable changes was in Darius's interactions with his children. Miles and Chloe, who had once seen him as distant and unreliable, began to recognize the sincerity and effort he was putting into rebuilding trust. He attended school events, helped with homework, and engaged in meaningful play, demonstrating patience and attentiveness that had previously been absent. Tasha, cautious yet observant, gradually allowed these interactions, seeing the authenticity in his commitment and the positive influence on their children's well-being. These moments were small victories, yet profoundly significant, marking the restoration of bonds that had been strained by past irresponsibility and poor choices. Beyond the family, Darius began actively engaging in community work, speaking at local schools and community centers about financial literacy, the consequences of materialism, and the importance of empathy. These sessions, once intimidating for him, became platforms where he demonstrated not only his understanding of past mistakes, but also his commitment to helping others avoid similar pitfalls. His stories resonated with audiences, highlighting lessons learned through lived experience rather than theoretical advice. Observing this, I felt a deep sense of validation. The hardships he had endured were not wasted, but rather transformed into tools for growth, education, and redemption. I continued my life alongside Eli, savoring moments of peace and joy that had previously felt unattainable. Our relationship, strengthened by mutual trust, respect, and understanding, provided a foundation of stability and love that had been absent in earlier years. The villa overlooking the ocean became a sanctuary where we could reflect, plan, and nurture our shared goals, while still remaining aware of the ongoing responsibilities involving Darius and his family. Our mornings often included quiet moments on the terrace, coffee in hand, as we observed the horizon and discussed strategies for family, philanthropy, and personal growth. These rituals grounded me, reminding me of the strength that comes from resilience, patience, and deliberate choice. Despite the progress, occasional challenges arose. Darius faced moments of doubt, financial pressures, and emotional strain, each testing his newfound commitment to responsibility. In these times, I witnessed both the fragility and the resilience of human character. His reactions were no longer impulsive or defensive. Instead, he sought counsel, reflected on past mistakes, and implemented practical solutions. Witnessing this transformation reinforced the principle that true change is neither linear nor instantaneous, but cumulative, achieved through repeated reflection, effort, and accountability. One particularly difficult moment involved a potential business opportunity that could have tempted him to revert to reckless financial behavior. The proposition was lucrative but involved shortcuts and ethically questionable arrangements. In the past, Darius would have leapt at such an opportunity without hesitation. Now he paused, consulted with Mark and Eli, weighed the long-term consequences, and ultimately chose integrity over immediate gain.
This decision, while small in appearance, represented a profound internal shift, highlighting the depth of his personal growth and the internalization of lessons learned from previous failures. Emotional growth paralleled financial and behavioral improvements. Darius became increasingly reflective, articulating regrets and aspirations with clarity and honesty. He expressed appreciation for my role in guiding, supporting, and, when necessary, withholding intervention, acknowledging that the most meaningful lessons are often learned through experience rather than rescue. His conversations revealed a deeper understanding of empathy, patience, and respect, extending not only toward family but also to colleagues, friends, and community members. This multidimensional growth fostered stronger relationships across all areas of his life, demonstrating that accountability and reflection are interwoven with emotional maturity and relational intelligence. I, too, found my perspective evolving. Observing Darius navigate challenges with increasing maturity reinforced my belief in the balance between compassion and accountability. The initial pain, humiliation, and fear I had endured were transformed into lessons about boundaries, the importance of measured support, and the power of letting natural consequences guide growth. My relationship with Eli deepened further, strengthened by shared experiences, mutual respect, and the understanding that love requires both protection and restraint. We navigated complex dynamics together, combining empathy with strategic guidance, ensuring that Darius's transformation was supported but not dictated. The children's presence added warmth and continuity, reminding all of us of the stakes and the importance of nurturing values that would shape their future. Darius's letters and calls became increasingly reflective, demonstrating not only his awareness of past errors, but also a commitment to ongoing growth. He shared successes, setbacks, and insights, illustrating the internalization of lessons that would guide him long after immediate crises had passed. These communications, often tender and sincere, reflected a shift from entitlement to responsibility, from emotional manipulation to genuine connection, and from reactive behavior to deliberate action. Observing these changes, I felt a profound sense of hope tempered by vigilance. Growth is an ongoing process, requiring patience, support, and consistent reinforcement. Darius's engagement with community, family, and professional obligations provided tangible evidence of his evolving character. His willingness to share experiences with others, guide youth, and foster understanding underscored a transformation rooted not in avoidance or superficial gestures, but in genuine reflection and applied learning. The path was neither easy nor devoid of setbacks, yet the trajectory was unmistakably forward. Over time, Darius's interactions with me evolved from moments of tension and resentment to dialogues marked by mutual respect, honesty, and constructive engagement. We established routines that honored boundaries while fostering reconciliation, weekly check-ins, structured conversations about the children, and collaborative problem-solving sessions. These interactions, though occasionally challenging, reflected a growing maturity and an understanding of the principles guiding our relationship: trust, accountability, and the recognition that true reconciliation requires both effort and consistency. The journey, spanning months of observation, guidance, and strategic intervention, culminated in moments of tangible growth, visible in both behavior and attitude. Darius's financial responsibility, emotional awareness, and relational integrity stood as proof of the effectiveness of deliberate consequence, patient support, and the insistence on personal accountability. Eli's guidance ensured balance, Mark's expertise provided protection, and my measured intervention reinforced the lessons necessary for sustainable transformation. In these months, I came to appreciate the delicate interplay between support, consequence, and personal agency, recognizing that meaningful growth requires a combination of structure, reflection, and autonomy. Observing Darius's evolution, I felt a sense of fulfillment and cautious optimism, knowing that the past's challenges had fostered resilience, maturity, and an enduring commitment to integrity. His ongoing engagement with community, family, and personal development demonstrated that the lessons learned were internalized, shaping not only immediate behavior but also long-term character. Through this process, I learned that true empowerment involves enabling growth through accountability, reinforcing lessons through experience, and supporting transformation without circumventing natural consequences. The cumulative effect of these months of deliberate guidance, reflection, and structured support had reshaped Darius into a more thoughtful, responsible, and empathetic individual, capable of navigating complex personal and financial landscapes with maturity. As I observed his steady progress, I felt gratitude for the journey, painful, challenging, yet ultimately transformative. The lessons learned, the boundaries set, and the support provided created a framework for enduring growth, not only for Darius, but for all of us involved. This period of transformation underscored the profound impact of accountability, patience, and deliberate guidance in fostering meaningful change. Darius's ongoing evolution served as a living testament to the enduring power of reflection, resilience, and principled intervention, highlighting that personal transformation, though challenging, is both possible and profoundly rewarding when nurtured with care, consistency, and thoughtful support.
Time had a way of bringing clarity and peace in ways I had never imagined. Darius, once reckless and consumed by material desires, had matured into a man who understood the true weight of responsibility, respect, and human connection. The transformation wasn't sudden, nor had it been easy, but months of reflection, accountability, and consistent guidance had reshaped him fundamentally. He now navigated daily life with intention, treating his children, ex-wife, and colleagues with patience, respect, and genuine care. Miles and Chloe, who had been distant and cautious, now ran to greet him with laughter and hugs, their innocence and love untouched by past turmoil. Tasha, still protective but observant, acknowledged the sincere changes, allowing Darius to demonstrate his commitment without interference. Together, we rebuilt a fragile family dynamic grounded in honesty, trust, and mutual understanding. Eli and I watched quietly from our home, observing these changes with a mixture of pride and relief, knowing our measured guidance had allowed growth without undue interference. The villa, overlooking the ocean, once simply a luxurious escape, had become a sanctuary not just for us, but a symbol of the new beginnings, lessons learned, and the balance between wealth and integrity. Darius's engagement with his community flourished. He spoke openly about his past mistakes at schools, local centers, and charity events, emphasizing the importance of financial literacy, emotional intelligence, and valuing relationships over possessions. Each speech was heartfelt, grounded in personal experience, and served as a way to give back while reinforcing his own transformation. The children, meanwhile, observed their father's efforts, learning firsthand that mistakes are opportunities for growth and accountability. My relationship with Darius also healed gradually. Our conversations became authentic, free from manipulation or resentment, focused instead on understanding, forgiveness, and constructive dialogue. Letters replaced desperate texts, reflective words replaced impulsive actions, and slowly but surely the bond between mother and son re-emerged stronger, tempered by experience and mutual respect. Eli's presence remained a source of stability and love, a constant reminder that true partnership requires patience, trust, and shared values.
He supported both Darius's transformation and my own ongoing journey, helping me balance compassion with the lessons learned from past hurts. Together, we navigated complex emotions, financial reconciliation, and family relationships, ensuring that decisions were deliberate, fair, and rooted in long-term growth rather than short-term relief. The final resolution came when Darius, fully aware of the consequences of his past behavior, successfully filed for bankruptcy under Mark's guidance, emerging financially stable and ethically grounded. He worked tirelessly to repay every debt, not as an obligation but as a commitment to honor responsibility and rebuild trust. Over time, he reconnected with old friends and colleagues, forming authentic relationships built on transparency and mutual respect rather than convenience or manipulation. These changes were visible in every aspect of his life: his demeanor, interactions, decision-making, and willingness to learn. The culmination of this journey was the reconciliation between Darius and me, marked not by grand gestures, but by quiet acknowledgement of growth, honesty, and a shared desire for healing. Miles and Chloe embraced both of us fully, witnessing firsthand the power of accountability, empathy, and second chances. We established a routine that balanced personal growth, family responsibilities, and professional endeavors, creating a harmonious environment where lessons were continually reinforced through action and reflection. I also deepened my commitment to philanthropy through the Letitia Foundation, channeling the strength and lessons learned from past hardships into meaningful initiatives for those in need. The foundation flourished, helping countless women and families, and became a source of purpose, fulfillment, and legacy for both Eli and me. Darius, now a dedicated father and community advocate, remained actively involved, showing our children and the public that growth is possible when guided by accountability and love. This period of transformation highlighted the importance of boundaries, measured support, and letting natural consequences guide meaningful change. Pride and materialism, once destructive forces, had been replaced by humility, reflection, and a commitment to values that transcended wealth. Over time, the villa became a home filled with laughter, love, and genuine connection. Eli and I celebrated our relationship anew, free from past pretenses, grounded in trust, and strengthened by the challenges we had overcome together. Our vows, renewed privately, symbolized not only love but also resilience, growth, and the courage to embrace life fully despite hardships. Darius approached Eli that day, extending sincere apologies and expressing genuine respect, marking the completion of his transformation and the restoration of family harmony. Our lives intertwined in a way that balanced personal happiness, responsibility, and ethical conduct, demonstrating that love and growth require patience, courage, and deliberate effort. Reflecting on the past, I realized that humiliation, betrayal, and hardship had been painful but necessary catalysts for understanding, resilience, and empowerment. They had taught me the strength to defend my dignity, the wisdom to withhold immediate rescue, and the patience to witness transformation without forcing it. Darius's journey served as a living testament to the transformative power of accountability, reflection, and deliberate guidance, showing that even the most wayward individuals can rediscover their integrity, purpose, and capacity for empathy when allowed to face consequences and guided wisely. In this final chapter, our family, though scarred by past mistakes, emerged stronger, bonded by experience, growth, and genuine understanding. Darius, once lost in materialism and reckless choices, now embodied the lessons of resilience, humility, and the importance of valuing relationships above wealth. Miles and Chloe grew up witnessing the tangible effects of responsibility, integrity, and reconciliation. Eli and I, secure in our love and mutual respect, embraced the future with optimism, knowing that our choices, patience, and guidance had fostered real change. Life, once chaotic and unpredictable, now flowed with a balance of peace, joy, and purpose. The story concluded not with extravagance or superficial resolution, but with authentic restoration, meaningful relationships, and the enduring belief that compassion, accountability, and deliberate action can transform even the most challenging situations into opportunities for lasting growth and fulfillment. In these months and years that followed, Darius continued to rebuild, nurture, and grow, his every action reflecting a commitment to integrity, family, and personal development. And I, standing beside Eli, felt a profound sense of closure, pride, and gratitude, knowing that despite the pain, humiliation, and challenges we had faced, life had led us to a place of peace, purpose, and enduring love. The lessons learned would remain with all of us, shaping the way we interacted, loved, and contributed to the world around us. In the end, it was not wealth, power, or material success that defined this journey, but the growth of character, the healing of relationships, and the understanding that true strength is measured by patience, resilience, and the courage to let those we love learn, fall, and rise again. With the sun setting over the ocean, casting golden light across our villa, I knew the journey had reached a satisfying and transformative conclusion, a story of redemption, resilience, and love, forever etched in our lives and hearts.